Hey there, everybody. Welcome to Demo Days, the show where we ask vendors tough questions while they demo their products for us. I'm your host, Steve Taylor. Today I'm joined by Bogdan from Proven Data. Bogdan, how you doing, sir?
Hey, pleasure to meet you, man.
Awesome. So I gotta ask, where are you from? Like Bogdan is such a unique name.
Sure. It's Eastern European name. So I was born and raised in Russia till like teenage years, and then my parents decided to dump it all and hop on Mayflower or whatever that is. And then they said, you know what, we want to try something else in life, and here I am.
All right, but you're not a KGB operative or anything?
Talking about. You know what they say, that you can't lie if you're a KGB agent. So I'm just gonna avoid that question.
Oh my goodness. All right. Well, let's talk about let's talk about proven data. We've already had some interesting conversations, guys. We've talked about zombie apocalypses and uh, just it's been
Global
an
warmings.
interesting, yeah, it's
Yeah,
been an interesting morning before we went live. But now we're going to get serious. Let's talk about proven data. What exactly does proven data do for MSPs?
sure. Yeah, I mean, our primary focus is rapid ransomware response and recovery, is to put it short. But to translate it is, I mean, if you listen to any cybersecurity vendors out there or any information out there, you would hear this a lot. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when will a ransomware attack happens, which essentially, a very well prepared company will be able to respond by themselves, right? And effectively. But that, you know, with MSPs, it gets a lot more complicated, right? It's
Mhm.
the enterprise that can truly make it work. With MSPs, especially being such a big target for threat actors, um, they're trying to get MSPs, because what happens is when an MSP gets hit by a hacker, let's say that, right, and gets ransomed, they ransom not the MSP. The goal is not to ransom the MSP, but typically the goal is to ransom all their clients. So once they get through to and then they breach an MSP, they don't just, if the MSP is hosting clients' data, oh yeah, they'll breach that. But otherwise, they're going to try and steal all of the credentials, identities of their clients, and try and breach their clients. And it's a huge issue for MSPs. And about 50% of our clients are MSPs due to that threat that exists today. And that's our focus.
All right. So ransomware. That's a thing of the past, though. I thought like they're not doing ransomware anymore, are they?
You'll be surprised, still on the rise, still on the rise. But you would see things in waves, right? And that's what we see, right? Sometimes what we get hit hard and we work around the clock, and everybody's getting ransomed and we're working hard. And then there's going to be a down wave when, okay, something happened. Like there's, for example, that Logbit was the last time that these guys got really screwed by law enforcement and authorities, Department of Justice, and they essentially sanctioned and revealed the identity of the leader of the group. And then since then, it was kind of like everybody got quiet. It was kind of like awkward, because the Logbit is like the biggest player out there. So everybody, okay, let's chill a little bit. And it got quiet for a couple months. And okay, for us, when it gets quiet, what we do is we do research, right? And we sit down and we hit hard on research. We're reversing, we're engineering solutions to respond better to these attacks, especially data recovery, right? So which is like unheard of, but we're going to get to it. But essentially, what happens is, and then it comes back, and this is a new wave right now. We've been really busy the last few weeks, as it's like, okay, everybody's just coming out of the woods, and it's always like somebody gets hit, and like from a threat actor type of organization, and they restructure, they do something, whatever they do, they split up, they restructure, they create new ransomwares, and then they come out again, and here we are. There's a bunch of attacks again.
All right. So let's talk about how you help because um, it's been a while for me, right? I ran an MSP, but I'm not wholly up to date on things, but uh, if you've got backups, you're good, right? You just
Mhm.
restore from backup, and all the problem's gone, right?
There's multiple layers of the problem, right? So first of all, okay, the first thing that happens is what we focus is on containment, right? So you want to stop the attack, right? So you identify an attack and you're like, okay, I need to stop it because maybe they haven't gotten to everything yet. Maybe they typically try and go after your backups, but maybe they haven't gotten to your backups. Maybe they haven't gotten to your sensitive data. Maybe they haven't gotten to your client's data. So the first thing you want to do is like get them out of the system. So essentially, stop the attack. That's containment. That's the first thing we focus on. Which is part of our incident response. So the second thing, once you contain the attack, and it's no, you need to essentially do forensic analysis. Well, you need to do a forensic triage, right? Because you need to collect the artifacts of what has happened. What the hell happened? How did it happen? Right? How did they get in? What did they take? What data was exfiltrated? You need to be answering some tough questions when these come, right? They can come from your insurance providers. They can come from your clients. It's like, hey, did my data actually get out there in somebody's hands that it shouldn't? Right. So these are going to be tough questions that are coming after a breach. So it's not just about getting data encrypted. It's about like, okay, your client's sensitive information. Okay, what has been leaked? What about if you have employees, right? Has their information been leaked out there? So all of that, all of these answers are going to need to be answered, and typically that is a forensic part of our job, right? So we collect every log we can off the system. We carve them if they have been deleted by threat actor. We can try and decrypt some. We get them out from anywhere we can, and we load that into our forensic analysis systems to further answer these questions and prepare a forensic report for a client. And then, of course, the third thing is going to be okay. Well, data, if data is encrypted, and it's most of the time it is encrypted, but not every time. And most of the time, data is exfiltrated, but not every time. So these are the things we need to help and answer. Okay, so data is, I mean, any threat actor today that breaches an MSP or anybody for the matter of fact, I mean, before they begin the encryption process, they typically will exfiltrate data and they'll identify where your backups reside. So they will not just be like, oh, okay, I'm just going to encrypt your live data and, hopefully you don't have backups. No, they're going to identify your backups, and they're going to encrypt your backups, or they're going to delete your backups so you cannot restore them. So that's what they go after. And then our job is, of course, to like, okay, help to recover the data of the client, ideally without paying a ransom, which we're pretty successful at. That is our niche. That's our specialty, and that's what we attempt to do every time.
All right. So I feel like there should be some things that MSPs can do. Not that I want to make it so MSPs don't need you, but are there some things that MSPs can do for their clients to maybe make your life easier once they bring you in?
Absolutely. So I'm going to answer. It's kind of two-part questions. Like, okay, first of all, how do I feel about not being needed? It's kind of like, okay, well, people are gonna break legs. It's like, what can we do not to break our legs? Like, how can we do? Well, don't do stupid stuff, right? Don't be careful where you step. Like, there's a bunch of preventative steps that you can do in order for that not to happen. Some would seem very simple, but truth of the matter is like, okay, none of these, doctors that help people in these situations have gone out of business because that just no matter what, that's going to happen, right? And then there's
Mhm.
this is an ever long battle of called red versus blue, the red teamers and the blue teamers, right? It never ends, and I'm not concerned a bit that at any point we're not going to be needed. But would I like to help people prevent this from happening? Absolutely. We actually operate. Part of our services are on prevention side. So absolutely, if at some point things come and where I'm needed, not needed as much as a responder, but more about like, okay, educate us of how to prevent this stuff from happening. Absolutely, we do everything from consulting to monitoring and a whole bunch of stuff, penetration testing, red teaming for ransomware. So anything in order to assist a company, an organization, or MSP, for the matter of fact, to prevent this from happening. So that's part one, right? And part two is like, okay, so what can you? I guess well, the question is like, okay, what can you do? That is obviously a whole big question.
Sure.
There's a layer of things that there's some simple things that I would suggest most MSPs to look into is like EDR, of course, ideally a
Mhm.
monitored EDR or managed EDR if you're not able to do it, right? There's going to be a bunch of policies, vulnerability assessments, right? Making sure that any publicly facing machines are continuously pen tested, right? Once a quarter, once a half a year, so something like that. There's a bunch of stuff, but there's some simple things. I would like to just quickly touch on the backups, right? You mentioned the backups. That is
Mhm.
actually like very simple to keep your data out of the hands of the bad guys without getting too expensive. I've seen, for example, rotational backup. One, it sounds annoying, but it's it's a practice, right? You get used to it. What is rotational backup? You would say is when let's say you have a hard drive, right, an external drive, which you're backing up to. You're backing
Mhm.
up to that drive for about a week. Then you swap the drives out, and you're backing up to another drive. Then you're swapping them back again. So you're rotating a drive or a NAS or whatever that is for a period of time, and then you swap them out. That thing just it's a bulletproof solution, right? You would think cloud is, you would think, on-site hidden NAS that you can't ping is going to be your solution, and it's not, right? The like for example, rotational backup is a huge one. Tape backups still do wonders in that sense. They're slow for recovery, absolutely, and there's a lot of disadvantages. It's hard to monitor if you're successfully backing up. There's a bunch of issues with that, but
I I gotta say, man, tape
sure.
backup. I mean, now I'm dating myself a little bit, but I gotta say,
Mhm.
uh, semantic backup exec back in
Mhm.
like 2007, 2008, that software was the bane of my existence because you never had a successful backup. You
Yeah.
always had like success with exceptions or just straight up failures or like
Mhm.
just
Yeah,
all these issues with your backups.
absolutely.
Some of
Yeah.
these cloud platforms out there, or even like, let's name drop a Datto BCDR. I feel like
Mhm.
those do a better job. So
Sure.
why are you saying we should have like a rotational backup? Because
Mhm.
I feel like we're going backwards 10 years.
Sure. Yeah. So if you ask me as a ransomware responder, right, as a ransomware remediator, essentially, so like, what do you see that actually works? I have to tell you what I see that works, right?
Gotcha.
That's what people come to me and they say, "Hey, please help me respond to an incident." I'm responding to an incident, and they're like, "Okay, well, your backups are good because you had a rotational backup."
Mhm.
Here, let's talk quickly about cloud backup, right? Do you people don't even like they have a hard time understanding how can a cloud backup be a problem? Like, how can that not like okay, I understand on site, yes, they can remote into my QNAP or whatever they can or Synology or whatever I got or whichever system I've got, and then they can encrypt my backups, whichever program I use to make these backups. Yeah, they get it. Okay, cool. Now, what is a problem with cloud? So, number one, what people must understand, right? And admins, or security people, everyone, when a threat actor gets into the system, they dump all of your passwords. Okay, they have live access to your system. They see a lot of times in the passwords or in a dump of all of your identities in the computer, which cloud platforms uh, for backup you use. Where do you have your password saved? And they're going to utilize your machine to log into that cloud provider. Sometimes it's AWS, sometimes it's whichever program that is. Right, like AWS is just a storage. I understand. So your backups can be at S3, or they can identify which program you used. So they can first issue here is they can log in and bypass a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times they can bypass your 2FA or MFA and delete, disable, or encrypt your backup wherever it resides. That's issue number one. Issue number two, a lot of cloud backups, they they encrypt your backup that resides on the cloud server, so only you can decrypt it. And then they issue you a key. Okay. So if you did not do a good job and you did not print that key out and put it in a safe somewhere, and you kept it somewhere digitally, right? They will, first of all, they will get into your email. They can totally scan your emails and delete any keys that you have. Okay. Or, they can mess up with your email big time if you have it in an email. Second, if you have it somewhere on your computers, these files are going to get encrypted. So I see it all the time where people have a cloud backup, but they can't decrypt the cloud backup because the encryption key for the cloud backup has been encrypted. Okay, so that renders the entire cloud backup useless. So two things that I'm seeing, as I said, is encrypted cloud backups, deleted cloud backups by somebody bypassing 2FA, logging into the provider, deleting them, disabling, whatever. And the third thing is, as I said, is actually the backup key being encrypted. So always an issue. I mean, of course, you can take some steps to prevent it. Some providers out there allow you to like disable deleting a backup for X amount of time after a backup. Like there's a bunch of different some things exist, but we still see it a lot. So I would totally say that cloud backup is not a bulletproof solution.
All right. So what else should an MSP? So let me ask this question differently.
Mm-hmm.
Let me back up first. Do you run an MSP also?
No, I do not, but we work so closely with MSPs, so we understand the business. We work from
Yeah.
data loss perspective and a whole bunch of ways. So yeah, I get the business.
No. All good. So
Mhm.
if you were to start an MSP today,
Mm-hmm.
what would you say is like a must-have? Like, I would absolutely have to sign up for Huntress, or if you don't want to name names, I would have to have an EDR or an MDR or an XDR or
Sure.
whatever. Like, give me just a bulleted list of things that you would want as an MSP.
So there's two ways to start up an MSP, right? And there's a way where you are operating with a low budget, or you are coming from somehow with some money, right?
Hmm.
You're either getting a loan or whatever, or you have a base of clients that are immediately paying you. If you're starting from scratch and you don't have any money, right, and you're starting up an MSP, it's challenging to sign up for Huntress unless you're just reselling that solution. There's a lot of challenges financially, I think, that MSPs have. They're trying to make as much money as they can while not signing up for billing solutions, right? So while Huntress is great, first of all, there's no EDR or no MDR like Huntress. Huntress is an MDR that is bulletproof. Okay. So, you know, I don't want to recommend a particular solution today. I'm a fan of multiple ones, including Huntress is great, but we have clients that come from Huntress. So, but in there, I would be there are some open source solutions for EDR as well that you can explore. XDR, depending on how much time you're willing to trade setting these up and monitoring these versus like having a reputable paid solution. So it's a question from an MSP, like, okay, how do you want to approach it? But the point is, you're right. Hey, you have to have an EDR, right? And as long as that box is checked, we can move on to the backups, right? You don't want to operate without one. That is super, super risky. These things do work and they work wonders. They block in a lot of advanced threats. So anyway, so now with backups, okay, most of what we see today in the market is going to be Veeam, right? There's a lot of virtualization that happens. Veeam is a great solution for backups, and then they're trying to make their backups more. The problem with Veeam is like every other backup vendor out there today, man, when it comes like they advertise heavily, and I don't want to like mess up with their brand or anything, but they advertise a lot about like, okay, where our backups are ransomware resilient. I can tell you, as the one that works on these backups every day, I have two researchers dedicated to Veeam backups. Okay, full-time researchers. That's all they do. I mean, they're not resilient to encryption. They're not resilient to ransomware. That's the bottom line. So no matter what you use, what software you use for backup, that is one question. There are many options out there. I think what's more important is how do you and where do you keep them, right? So that you have that option somewhere. And imagine that a threat actor can get into your system, can scan everything and see what you're accessing, what passwords you have saved, what credentials you've got, all the network storage, all the IPs they pinged, and they can get into anything because they will have your passwords, or they can brute force them in your system, or they can get into your cloud and likely bypass your MFA. What do you have that will be like, what offline option do you have, if any? Or if you have a cloud one, if they get into your cloud, will they be able to mess with it? That is the framework that you need to be thinking from being an MSP. And I think, like, if you're starting an MSP, as you said, and you have limited budget, rotational backup is very cheap. That's all it does. You just need to swap the drives. In my opinion, that is a bulletproof and an inexpensive solution.
All right. So I think you said that 50% of your customers are MSPs.
About so, yeah.
So what makes proven data the preferred choice for MSPs over other data recovery and forensic service providers?
Sure, yeah. So frankly, I don't think there's much of competition when it comes to a ransomware recovery, data recovery, that is, right? Some folks are kind of dipping their toes in it, and some have capabilities, very limited capabilities. That is our niche. That is our focus. That's a lot of, we have over 90% success rate in ransomware recovery. Over 90% is kind of like, unheard of, so to say, in a way. It's like, okay, it's a whole, we can have a whole different podcast on, like, okay, how is that even possible? Because everybody believes that, when you get hit with a ransomware and they encrypt your data, the only way to get it is to pay ransom, and that's false. That's not true. It only takes TA, a threat actor, to make one little mistake. You can either decrypt or recover data, and then that's a whole different thing of how that happens, right? So I think that's what makes us stand out big time. Our focus on ransomware and basically ransomware DFIR, digital forensic incident response. That's what we do. That's what we focus on. That's the thing that we are best at, right? And then I think that's what makes us stand, apart from everyone else. Is like, okay, these guys, that's what they do, right? And then there is another company that does it, but they focus on ransomware, but they mostly do ransomware negotiation with threat actor. They essentially are helping an organization to negotiate with the threat actor and pay the ransom. But that's mainly, I mean, they also do DFIR, but that's, for us, that's like, okay, we're more about technical response and not about negotiation with threat actor.
All right. And then are you able to share any success stories? I need to preface. I like to preface a lot of my questions, don't I? So it's it's tough. It's tough getting success stories from MSPs, especially when it comes to like ransomware recovery and that kind of thing, because what MSP wants to admit that they or one of their clients got hit by ransomware?
You're pressing. In the beginning, you said where we are asking tough questions of of vendors. That is, I think, our toughest question. That you're putting pressure on my pain point here. You're 100% right. All right. Nobody wants to admit that they got ransomed, and this is where and here's the, on channel program, right? Um, a lot of it is built around vendors' feedback, right? Vendors' reviews from vendors' perspective. Like, okay, well, people notice you when you have decent amount of reviews. It has been very difficult for, like, people are just like thinking we're their lifesavers. They're all promising to go and leave us a review, and they just don't. Okay, and then the reason is because they don't want to admit that, right? Especially in MSP, like, we have clients that are, just companies, and then, like, yeah, they're more or less like, they will give us a public testimonial and say, okay, sure, yeah, I mean, and that's kind of like part of the deal. They're like, oh, I can't afford it, man, can you cut me a break? They need the discount. We're like, okay, well, we do. Our struggle today is obtaining customer feedback because nobody wants to admit it. So I will give you that, but you gotta have to at least put a couple words for us. But these are not MSPs, no matter what, because they believe that if they admit it, they will not get a customer. Okay, so now to touch base on a success story. So there's one recent one that I can mention that's been in the reason it's been in the news. So I don't know if you heard a couple months ago, this company in Chile, it's a MSP slash hosting provider, the biggest one in there, called PowerHost. They had the largest ever ransom amount that they've been requested. It was about, I think, $140 million or something. It
Wow,
was insane.
that's a
Yeah,
lot of
because
money.
it's a lot of money because they've basically, their ESXi that hosted probably hundreds of clients. Some of the biggest companies in Chile got hit, encrypted, and they basically were asking for each of the client about $2 million or so. So I guess, well, you divide 140 by two, it's like, I guess it's 70 is what the ones that they were. I think there are a lot more clients, but what the power host wanted is like, okay, well, these are the critical clients we really need. These are like dedicated, you know, or VPS clients or something like that. I'm not 100% sure what type of client that was, but and then they called us, and there was a little bit of, obviously, language barrier, a little bit, because I mean they're in Chile, and we're primarily English speaking company, but we found somebody in the company to communicate with, and we basically got them fully recovered. Right, that is the data recovery. We didn't do their DFIR. They had a cybersecurity company that provided with that service. They did the forensics and the incident response, but we were hired for data recovery, and then the whole thing was recovered, and without paying a dime to threat actors. And the amount of money that they saved, probably 99.999% or something like that. So it was a novel type ransomware, which we had to research, and we had to work for a little bit with, but relatively quickly, within a couple of days, their critical clients were up and running. Some others took about a week. So it's not super quick. I understand that. Yeah, sure. Unless we have a solution in hand, if something we have to research, typically it's not going to be like, oh, I just pay a ransom and tomorrow you decrypt everything. So yes, that there's the downside a little bit here, where you might have to wait a little bit, but then you're not paying that ransom. And even if your insurance is paid for that ransom, man, they're going to get you. They're going to get you, not today, but they'll get you tomorrow, you
Mhm.
know? So, but speaking of success story, I think that's the one I want to like highlight. And then the only reason we got their permission to speak about the case, because we had to. They as a hosting provider, and especially in Chile, the limited budget was definitely a big issue, and we had to like, hey guys, you're already like they were all over the news, right? They were on bleeping computer. They were like everywhere. Like if you go to newsgoogle.com, for example, and Google PowerHost, man, you're going to see a bunch of articles, and then a few articles about how we did our recovery as well. So that's an interesting case study that
Yeah,
I wanted to bring up.
that is an interesting case. So, I take it, everything's rainbows and unicorns now for them.
I mean, as far as our job, part of the job concerned, I believe so. As far as what they do, I mean, man, I don't really follow up unless they hire us to. Yeah,
Sure.
but they're up and running as far as I know, which is great. They got that incident result. It was a major incident.
So, what kind of training and experience do your team members have? Like,
Mhm.
is it the same type of training that like techs at an MSP would have, or is it a specialized skill set to do data recovery services?
Sure, yeah. Well, data recovery is not challenging as itself, right? In the sense of, let's speak of what the traditional data recovery is. And this is where a lot of insurance companies get mixed up, and they're like, well, whoa, what are you talking about? We've hired data recovery companies before, they couldn't do anything. Because, I mean, traditional data recovery engineer, and this, we operate a data recovery side of the business, traditional, is you got to repair a drive, a hard drive, a RAID array or something. You're mostly focused on the physical repair of the medium, and then utilizing software based tools to scan the device, for and restore the deleted data, or just all the data of the image that you've made of a defective device. So the technician's job is to operate the software that exists, as well as to have a physical repair, like either swap the circuit board on drive or whatever the case is, or open it up in the clean room and replace head disk assembly or something like that. So that is the typical traditional sense of data recovery. Ransomware data recovery has nothing to do with that. There's our guys that are in a ransomware department cannot do the physical drives or physical medium, and the physical data recovery guys can't do the ransomware stuff, not even by any stretch of imagination. So now let's talk about that skill set. That's a very challenging, difficult, and unique set of skill sets that one has to have in order to do anything like that. And this is our biggest pains is of course to scale a team and find more of these type of experts. So these are typically the guys that we have are typically super senior reverse engineers, right? That understand data and systems on a very, very low level. Okay. These are the guys who can, first of all, number one skill required is a reverse engineer, right? They are going to load your piece of ransomware or system, whichever we're trying to recover or learn how to recover, into like IDA, and they're gonna, which essentially unpacks it, to hex code, and they're checking how does this program operate, whether it's malware or whether it's software. So they got to understand that the reversing skill. They have to be excellent at cryptography, of course. I mean, that's what we're doing, right? These guys, and typically, I can't split this into multiple roles. I have to have a somebody that knows all of it within the same head, because only that what makes it effective. They can analyze they can reverse engineer, they can figure out cryptography part of the problem of the task. They're excellent at understanding operating systems, because a lot of times it's like, okay, you're working with virtual machines. Clients want the bootable virtual machine, right? Even if so, getting that repaired to a point, because encryption damages it, right? So we have to repair them. We have to make sure they're bootable. That is a huge challenge of itself, making bootable VMs, right? Or operating systems, whichever. So excellent at that. Excellent at file systems. Okay. So because a lot of this work is about compression, file systems, file records, and how does everything lay on top of each other, right? There's encryption, compression, there's blocks, and all of that has to be figured out. Where does everything go in order to provide a result for a client? So all of these things have to be within the same researcher that we have in order to achieve that result. So the skill set requirement is insane, and we have to find these people from all over. We can't even focus just on the US alone. We have to go out there for researchers. Responders are more or less, we're trying to focus on US based responders, but from researcher perspective for data recovery, man, we have to go everywhere and find these people. It's so challenging.
What kind of forensic services does Proven Data offer, and how can MSPs benefit from these services?
Sure. So we mostly focus on ransomware response and forensic side of it, but we do traditional breaches. We actually offer, also one of our departments has a traditional digital forensics department where we work with like drones, IoT, anything, hard drives, just doing the digital forensic investigation for all kinds of cases. But we mostly focus on ransomware and ransomware breaches. So, and that's the whole separate team under Proven Data that does the response, right? So they can dispatch on site if needed. They can most of response we do is remote. Typically there's no need to be on site. So, but yeah, and then they do everything, as I said, from containment up to a forensic report, if that's something that client requires.
Gotcha. Somebody in the chat here wants to hear about the 4.9 stars on Trustpilot with over 180 reviews. He says that's exceptional. How did you get that type of NPS feedback?
Yeah, so Proven Data historically been a data recovery company, right? So I know, although when I'm talking about challenges of our, getting MSP reviews, that is a challenge for Proven Data on the channel program side, which is focuses on MSPs, as well as we're trying to really get the feedback from ransom response. Now, Trustpilot is you can have feedback from ransomware and just traditional physical data recovery, as well as a forensic response. But we do, that I think that's what just collaboration of that feedback allows to get you know, uh, a better NPS feedback in there. But we try and we just work hard. I mean, we are focused on results. We don't, that's first thing for us. And if that's the feedback, I don't really have an explanation for it. It just comes.
That's fair. It's you're just so awesome that people want to talk about it.
I guess
For
so. I mean, yeah,
for the data recovery piece. When it comes to the
absolutely,
ransomware recovery, then nobody wants to talk about that. But
exactly. Yeah, that's. I think it's just part of the challenge, right? And then I embrace the challenge, right? Is okay. How do you make people? How do you? Because we also don't want to really, and this is why we are not truly doing a full demo, right? It's called demo days, but we're not really demoing the software or the tools we've developed for the reason of, look, we don't want to help the bad guys, into, like, first of all, understanding our capabilities. How do we do it? Where do we do? So we have to be descriptive. Although we share some of these things with law enforcement, right? I've occasionally worked with FBI and show them, okay, here's what we got going on. This is what we've got. We share some solutions with them, sometimes for free. If we feel like this is at the end of the life, or we're seeing threat actor. Let's say that there's a malware that encrypts data, and then we are seeing a weakness in it, and then we've been exploiting this weakness to provide clients with the recovery. And then we see, and bam, there's a new variant that comes out and fixes that stuff that we've been exploiting. So what we're going to do is we're going to share that with law enforcement and say, hey, this is what we've been exploiting for all this time, but they fixed it up. So from, let's say, February 2023 till April 2024, that variant that's been active and dominant for this specific ransomware strain, we've been exploiting it. So if you have a database of clients that reported a ransomware breach to you, which everybody should do, and then I believe most of them do report to FBI, and FBI has a database of that, then they can contact these people and say, hey, we've got a solution for you. Here's a decryptor, and then they're going to utilize the decryptor.
so how do you guys handle incident response?
Mhm.
Like how does that work?
Sure. So, incident response, and that's kind of what what it is. If we are the ones, well, let me just say this before we get into too much. Each MSP and each business actually must have what's called an IRP, right? What is an IRP? Is an incident response plan. What do you do? Who's responsible for doing X, Y, Z? Everything has to be at least slightly planned in advance, for organization and MSP, as I said, because what people must understand is when this hits, and it's just when does it hit, and it will hit. Everybody's in a state of panic if they don't have an IRP. They make mistakes. Okay, they don't know who to talk to, where to go, who to call. That is very costly if you don't have that simple document, right? That outlines what the heck do you do to respond to an incident. And it can be, IRP can be focused on different areas of that, on different incidents, but in general, this is a must have. So anybody listening today, if you don't have an IRP in place, please look it up. I mean, look, if you want to use ChatGPT to help you come up with this, be my guest, but it will save you, right? Big time. So absolutely. Now, when we are hired for that, is what we do. We have our own we have a template for which we utilize to follow. Right, I can go into exact details, technically, but in general, our job, as I said, number one is going to be containment, triage, right, and just capturing and then figuring out, and then the next that's kind of the part of the incident response. The whole incident is broken into IR, incident response, DF, digital forensics, and remediation. Right. This is the typical, three components of an incident response. Right. So in our world, incident response is mostly about containment and triaging. And that's how we handle what we now from technical, just to give you a quick, because that can be another hour or more of how that's being done. But yeah, typically an incident response team, once they identify the most effective way to contain an incident, whether you need to shut down the whole network from firewall, just block everything inbound, outbound, or it's going to be, limited type of containment. Let's say typically what every cybersecurity company does is they're going to spin up a clean network, right? And then they're going to start, once they identify the clean hosts on the network and they confirm that they're clean, they're going to start moving things to that. They're going to isolate first everything on the old network, and they're going to slowly move things as they confirm that they're clean to the clean network. That is typically how it's done, right? And then on top of that, as soon as we respond, so we try to do similar thing, depending on what company we're responding to. But of course, big part of it is like, okay, working with the EDR vendor if there's one, deploying an EDR agent if there isn't one, or as well as deploying our incident response agents that we have. So we just go immediately. First thing we do is we deploy that everywhere, right? We that incident response agent allows us to just a million different things that it allows us to do, really. But it's a huge help in creating forensic images of all of the affected hosts on the network. Have remote execution of specific commands and tools to help containment. So don't want to bore you with too many technical details, but yeah, that's kind of how the components of an incident response that Proven Data has.
Now, you mentioned that you've got an incident response agent.
Mm-hmm.
If even if you were to say like, oh, we use XYZ software,
Sure.
like having the software is what, 10%, and knowing what to do with the software and how to handle the incident is the other 90%, right?
Right. So typically, there's a lot of variables, right? If you have an EDR, right, and then or especially if you have a managed detection response, right? Let's say Huntress, you mentioned that. Huntress is going to be doing your IR, right? You're not going to be likely calling us for the incident response part. You're likely going to call us for the forensic part and recovery part, but you're not likely to be calling us for the incident response part because you literally have an agency that provides you with that. That's part of the service. Same thing as CrowdStrike, Sentinel-1, and a bunch of them, right? That's what you're paying them to really be your security vendor. And if there's an incident and the EDR, you could say fails, right? For some reason, that's their job to help you contain that part, right? So that is typically how you'd work closely with those companies to do that, right? So that's kind of something I also wanted to mention.
Gotcha. Dean has another question, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Does an MSP typically go through insurance to work with you, or do they contract directly? I've often heard you don't do any forensics or remediation until your insurance IR team says to.
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's three paths, so to say, that can happen. Obviously, if a lot of MSPs are not going to be insured, and then they will contact us directly, and we are going to handle the entire incident for them from beginning to an end. Let's say the second option is okay. If they have an insurance provider, they typically will open the claim with the insurance provider, and then the insurance provider will say, "Hey, all right, we are the ones telling you, we're the ones handling the incident. We are going to bring in our vendors, and it typically starts with a legal counsel. So they would bring in a legal counsel and say, okay, legal counsel is going to, because of the concerns of the privacy and the data that might have been exfiltrated and just the sensitive nature of the data that you guys had, we will dictate how this is done, and they don't want anybody in because of the sensitive nature of the deal until the legal counsel says so, whether or not they retain your service or not. And then there's a third option: is you do have the insurance, but your provider says, hey, as long as they, first of all, we are on panel of multiple insurance carriers, so the insurance might just recommend you to go to us. But if we're not on the panel of that specific vendor, they're going to say, well, you can use whoever you want. We don't really have panels, or, we have panels, but we just allow our, clients to use whomever they want. Then, just, there's few things they want to know about who the vendor is, but then the bills will go to the insurance company, and the insurance company will pay the vendor. So that's a third type of situation. So it really depends. Look, if you have insurance, call them first, open a claim. You can contact us at the same time. We are going to start looking into this thing. And if the insurance carrier says, yo, stop everything right now, that's what you're going to have to do. Right. So that's it.
Sorry, I didn't mean to take my attention elsewhere. My dog, she is scratching her ear, and she's going.
Nice.
So, and then I looked at her, and she just stopped, just looked at me like, "Oh, my bad. Is this bothering you?"
Oh my gosh! What kind of dog is it?
She's a pit bull.
Oh, pit bull. Okay, love them.
Yeah, she is the sweetest dog I've ever met.
Yeah.
It's so funny to me, the stigma around pit bulls, but
Yeah. There is stigma, that's for sure. Yeah, I got a bunch of border collies because I live on the farm, but
all right.
they do the job. They got work to do.
All right. So what kind of like cutting edge technology and tools do you guys get to play with?
Sure. I mean, we work with a lot of EDR vendors, and then it's cool to see their stuff. We work with, and we fork very popular uh, incident response tools, and we improve them, we add things to them. But I mean, of course, and I can't tell much on technical aspect of things of how we do things. I think what we do is pretty damn cutting edge. That being able to go get so deeply advanced and so far into the data aspect of things, right?
Mhm.
And be able to get that data out, put together, and be useful, or have a full recovery for a client to decrypt that from cybersecurity capabilities and cryptography capabilities and data recovery capabilities. I would say that's pretty damn cutting edge, right? But as far as like, okay, gadgets wise, there isn't really much of a gadgeting here, right? It is mostly reverse engineering. Most of the work we do is on the forensic side, as I said, is an IR program. On the recovery side is IDA. That's what we sit and we give reverse all day long. That's what we do.
So how do you guys ensure compliance with various regulations like HIPAA?
Mm-hmm. Well, HIPAA. Let's see. So typically, we work if let's say this is a company that handles HIPAA data, right? If they have an incident, they need to obtain a legal counsel, okay? Because it is a sensitive matter that should be handled by a legal counsel. We're not a legal service provider. We're not a legal counsel. However, we know how to handle the data if we are recovering the data to make sure that it is compliant with HIPAA, right? In the sense of like, okay, we don't, first of all, in the ransomware response and data recovery, we don't copy that data into the laboratory, from remote environment. So we don't transfer it anywhere. We work on site in a very secured environment, very secure. We have to make sure that everything is contained. We work in a clean environment, and we store everything within the client's environment, which is essentially, per your question, is staying within the HIPAA compliance. Now, it's more interesting when, okay, what happens if equipment is down, right? And they need that to be worked on. So they have to take it to the lab, one of our labs. And then, within the lab, we are an ISO 27,000, as well as SOC certified organization. So there is, a compliance part on our end that has to happen to make sure that's maintained, as well as there's no exactly like HIPAA certification, but there's HIPAA compliance. We have to train all of our engineers and all of our employees to make sure that they understand how that framework works and operates, so we're staying compliant. But it's, for us, it's essentially, okay, we recover data for the client in the lab within the contained environment. We, when recovery is done, the client verifies that it is good data. We pretty quickly have to, on our end, wipe it off of our servers entirely. And how we handle it back to the client has to have a specific format of how we're doing it. And that kind of wraps it in, for us, for the data recovery part, especially of how that's handled. As I said, for DFIR, that is more laying on the side of legal counsel, how they notify their clients, how they notify MSPs or the organization's clients of a breach. Where do they go to report it? How do they identify, which clients have been affected and what data has been affected? So that, they ask us, provide a report, state facts, only facts, no guesses, no assumptions of what the hell happened from the forensic perspective. And if you can provide proof of data exfiltration or artifacts pointing to data exfiltration and seeing what data has been exfiltrated, then the legal counsel will typically utilize our reporting as well as any exfiltration information in order to make the notifications of the either clients, partners, employees, or patients for HIPAA on what happened. They'll say, hey, it basically will be like either an email or a letter saying, hey, there has been an incident at this company, and we believe the following information has been, breached or accessed or, stolen, right? So, something like that. And then the person has to take steps in order to protect themselves from that, right?
So, how quickly are you going to start working on something when we have an incident? Does it
So I
vary
think
based on the type of service?
that's a great question. Actually, I like that because that is, remember when you asked me, okay, what makes proven data stand apart? That is definitely one of the things that we do kind of shine at. We try to really work super hard, and which basically means having more employees and feeding more mouths, is to be more available, right? I see so many security vendors are like, okay, sure, we'll respond in 4 days, because that's what it is. We really try, like if you call us and say we need you guys in an hour, we'll be there in an hour.
That's pretty cool.
And yeah, July 4th was a busy day for us because that's a lot of attacks happen on July 4th, right? And for the reason is because all of the admins are not looking, and all the threat actors, they don't have July 4th, and where they sitting. So
How many people you have on your team?
just under 50.
Okay. 50, you said.
Mhm.
Wow. That's a much bigger team than I anticipated.
Mhm.
But that's cool.
Yeah. I mean, some sales guys, marketing team super small, but mostly DFIR. Obviously incident responders, forensic guys, reversers, engineers, technicians. So that's most of the team is technical.
How does your pricing work for your various services?
Sure, great question. So for forensic response, we typically do it in by hour, right? There's an hourly block. We have a scoping call with the client, and the client tells us, hey, this is what's going on, this is what happened. And we tell them like, okay, all right, what's the size of your network? We're trying to scope and understand what the hell happened and what are we dealing with? How big
Mhm.
is going to be this job and how many resources we're going to have to bring in. So based on that, we will quote the client and say, okay, we think you're going to need 40 hours or 20 hours or whatever. And we kind of tell them to anticipate this hourly, there's a fixed hourly rate. And then we're telling them, okay, this is a block of hours we believe we need. And if we are, over that amount of hours, we're going to ask you for an extension, right? We're going to say, okay, we need to extend because there's, the scope is bigger than we anticipated, or because we're not fitting in, we need an extension of that hourly block that you've allowed us to use. So that is the everything in forensics, everything incident response. Recovery is a more sensitive topic, especially because there are choices in a way that client has. So on one hand, the client has have an insurance company if they have, or paying for it out of pocket to a threat actor and getting their data, depending on the threat actor group, with about 80% confidence within a matter of a few hours, and 90% success rate or so, right? So just people think that if they pay ransom, everything is going to work. It doesn't. About 90% is going to work. There's a lot of stuff that they still call us about and say, hey, we need help with this because the threat actors provided decryptor didn't work. There's obviously, depending on the group, some will never send you a decryptor. So that also is a risk. So it's about a risk thing, right? And then how quickly they can respond. Well, they have a decryptor. Usually they can, if you pay in the ransom, they can send that back to you pretty quickly. Okay.
Mhm.
Now, on the other hand, you have us. What do we propose? Well, there's a 90% success rate in the recovery. Then out of that 90%, we probably have 50% of cases, let's say 45 out of 100 cases, we can deliver very quickly. And 45 will take a while, and that can be a few days, could be a few weeks. Sometimes, rare cases, very complex system that needs research will take months to deliver results. So that is what the reality is. And you need to talk to us and see how that's going to look like. And depending on that, how much is there to do? How complex is the system? Do we need to do a research? Do we have a solution? We will give the client a fixed cost, and that's a guaranteed fixed cost. If we don't get it done, client pays nothing. All right, that is kind of what the recovery has to look like because of the choices that the client has. Like, okay, do I go to hacker and pay him the ransom? Do I go to these guys? We have to be in a way kind of competitive. Price-wise, we're going to be most of the time a lot less expensive, but there are cases where that's not going to be the case. The encryption is super sophisticated. It's the recovery is very difficult. It's going to cost $100K for us to do this, but the ransom is $10,000. Somehow, somewhere, the threat actor for some reason decided to ask for $10,000. So that's no brainer. Most of the people will just go and pay the $10K.
So if an MSP has one of their clients get ransomed,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, there's so many variables, but is there like a minimum we've never charged less than 20,000
Yeah.
or whatever?
Yeah. I mean, rarely have we ever charged under 10,000.
Okay.
But there's been some exceptions. But if it's pretty straightforward, simple, and then it is few systems that we working with, yeah, we can do that. Yeah, we have solutions sometimes that are one couple button clicks, right? It's just more about research and maintaining these solutions, but they exist where we
Mhm.
just load a virtual machine or load a backup file or something like that, or load a virtual drive, whatever the case is, and press a button, bam, it recalculates some stuff, does whatever magic it does, spits out the working file. So few ransomwares it works with, few cases that it does work with, but then we're not going to charge arm and a leg for it because this is pretty simple and straightforward.
Yeah, but at the same time, there's and I'm gonna butcher it, but there's that story of the guy who gets called in. It's an emergency, and he wants 100 an hour,
Mm-hmm.
and he charges the hour to do the thing, and all he did was click a few things. And he said, well, all
Yeah.
he did was click a few things.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was $1 for me to click a few things. It was $99 for me to know which things to click.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
absolutely. So yeah, that knowledge is very costly because otherwise your alternative is to go and and to pay the ransom. That's going to be a lot more expensive, sometimes millions of dollars, right? So it's a story about the guy, an engineer that went to repair a giant ship and then the motor wouldn't start, and then they called this engineer or whatever to fix the ship, and the engineer comes and listens and hears, like, touches it and like just takes a hammer and taps it once, and then bam, everything works. And then the company gets a bill for $10,000, and they are so pissed off. It's like, the guy had been there for a minute. how the hell does he charge us $10,000? So they ask him to send an itemized receipt, and he sends them an itemized receipt. Tapping the hammer, $10. Knowing where to tap the hammer, $9,980 or whatever. So that is kind of the story that you're talking about, I think. But yes, there's that aspect where it is moderate, right? We go back and see how complex the research was and what's the cost to maintain that research. How frequently do we need to update that research? How much do we need to continue that work? And that kind of goes into. And the reason why we can't really charge $9,980 for knowing where to tap, because we work with insurance companies, right? They don't understand that. They simply will be like, "What are you charging us? We're not paying $9,980 for knowing where to tap."
Because there's 3 other companies that know that information too, so we want to go with the lowest bidder.
Yeah, that's not even so much of an issue. There isn't a lot of times. There is not going to be that case. Nobody's going to know where to tap. They're just not going to pay.
Got it.
They have the option of just not paying, which essentially we feel bad for the client because they're going to have to come out of pocket, or we're not going to get paid. So there's that option, and we don't want to put our clients in that situation. That's why we have to be like, okay, we got to be like, come within reason and as much as we can, and really bill for R&D versus knowing where to tap.
Sure. And then since we're talking about the lowest, now I gotta ask, what's the highest you've ever charged for ransomware recovery?
Yeah, probably around 200,000 was the highest. That basically required the entire team, hands on deck, put all other emergency cases on pause. And it was a very mixed, complex job, multiple levels and multiple types of ransomware were executed, and then basically, which required, part of it was research, part of it was technicians, part of it was on site, part of it was in a lab. It was a very major job. It was a very major company, and they were losing upwards $300,000 per business day or something like that, or maybe more than that. I mean, so that's that very important aspect. It's like, okay, and then usually a company that loses that much money per day, or let's say there are companies that are going to lose millions of dollars per day, they will just pay the ransom. But in that case, it was more complex. I think it was a sanction entity that they couldn't pay the ransom to, and then that made things a lot more complicated. So we have to be careful where we stand with our offerings, because an enterprise, if they truly get ransomed, which first was really rare, but let's say that that's the case, when they get ransomed to a point, they have no point of restoration, right? So like a large company, so they would be losing millions of dollars, and then it's so much easier for them to pay ransom. Just like MGM, Caesar, although they weren't ransomed, like for Caesar just went and paid it because it was they swept it under the rug. It was so quick and easy.
Yeah, the amount of money they wanted, it was like a rounding error for that company.
Yeah, exactly. It was nothing, and then nobody even knew about it until the MGM happened, and then everybody went and looked into, like, I forgot, a public traded company has to report an incident, and then they just found that Caesar actually reported that incident, and somebody dug it out, and it was the same skittering spider that attacked him. So, but these guys like totally could have just like went unnoticed, and nobody talked about Caesar. Everybody talked about MGM because these guys didn't want to pay the ransom, and they were the ones fighting it, and they were like. Although even if it was a couple $1 million that ransom, the people couldn't get in a room. There was so much negative press. It was so bad. In that case, I think it might have been worth it. But again, we're dealing with a major company. Typically, when that type of hit happens, there's no encryption. There's just like they're either going to mess with them or they're going to steal some sensitive information and threaten to leak it out. So it's too difficult to ransom a very large organization. They have multiple layers of security backups, and it's very noisy. Encryption process is very noisy. So that's going to get caught in a big enough company, and then they're going to have a point of restoration, and you're just going to waste their time. So, yeah.
So I know we're over, but I've got one last question I want to ask you, Bogdan.
Sure. Yeah.
Besides all the stuff that you would learn in cybersecurity awareness training, you guys do all this really cool research, and I just got to know: is there something that you see that we should be looking out for?
Threat intelligence, right, is essentially in a way what you're kind of asking, I think,
Hmm.
right? So, like, okay, what type of threats are out there? And I think the biggest thing that I don't think that in a way things are getting more complicated, but I think we're gonna see just more volume and less sophistication with AI tools, if that's what we're talking about, right? That from the if you there's AI and IoT, there's two sides of it. There's like, okay, what are we looking at? What is gonna happen? I think the future holds a lot of dumb people utilizing utilizing chat GPTs of
Which sounds
that are
great for you.
okay off the hooks. For me, yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to happen. It's going to scale, and there's going to be a lot of schoolboys, high schoolers running this stuff, and getting paid, right? So that's going to happen most likely because of how easy it's going to be to get into this industry. On the other hand, IoTs, I think, are going to be posing more threat as we, not by design, but because more things online, and then more difficult for companies to, although there's no lack of CVEs and no lack of vulnerabilities out there that are being exploited every day. But I think that that's probably likely going to be a threat at some point where, okay, you got a smart lock, you got a smart this, smart that is all on the internet, that's publicly facing, that's going to get more eyes on it, got to get breached. And they all have micro Linuxes in there, and that's going to be the access point and the attack vector for future attacks. I think that's probably what the advanced future looks like, from my perspective. But I might be wrong. We'll see. We'll have that conversation a year and see if I was right.
And I guess the question everyone wants to know is,
Mhm.
if I wanted to start hitting people with ransomware, what's the best way to do it without getting caught?
Oh, first of all, you're gonna have to move to a beautiful country of Russia or North Korea, one of those, and and then you're gonna meet some people very quickly that are gonna put you on the right path, and then it doesn't ever end well. So, but yeah.
Doesn't ever end well. Well, Bogdan, this has been enlightening. I appreciate you coming on here and teaching us about what you do at Proven Data. Guys, go to channelprogram.com and in the search bar, look up Proven Data, Proven Data, two words. And you can learn more about what they do there. You might be able to see some reviews. If you've worked with Proven Data, please go to Channel Program and leave some reviews. Especially if you've used them for ransomware recovery. Come on, guys, let's be honest with other MSPs and tell everyone how awesome their services were.
Come
So.
out, guys, come out. We know you're there. We know who you are.
Yeah, don't make next time he comes out, I'm gonna have him come with a list and he's gonna start naming names. So you
Yep.
might as well just out yourself.
Don't put yourself in there, boys.
All right. Take care, everybody. Thanks, Bogdan.